Welcome, everyone. I'm Lee Merriweather, and with me is Todd Orston. Todd and I are partners at the law firm of Merriweather and Tharp, and you're listening to Merriweather and Tharp Radio on the new Talk 106.7. Here you learn about divorce, family law, tips on how to save your marriage if it's in the middle of a crisis, and even from time to time, tips on how to take your marriage to the next level. If you want to learn more about us, you can always check us out online at AtlantaDivorceTeam.com.
Well done.
Thank you. I've been practicing.
Yeah.
We ready
a good surprise. No hiccups, no issues. That was smooth, nicely done.
Oh, thank you.
But while that's a good surprise, you know what isn't a good surprise?
What?
You know what? You know where a surprise maybe isn't isn't a good thing?
Divorce.
There you go. There you go. We're all about setting expectations and surprises. As attorneys, we don't like surprises when we're representing somebody and we have them on the stand and it turns out that they like to torture butterflies or whatever. Surprises in the context of a divorce, not good for the attorney, but also for clients. And that's what today's show is going to be about. We're going to talk about surprises experienced by divorcing women.
Right.
So we're going to hit it from that gender side. And in the future, we're going to do one on surprises for men that are going through a divorce. But the bottom line is those types of surprises not good. And the surprises we're talking about are ones where someone has gone through the process and maybe they haven't been educated. They don't understand what their rights and obligations are going to be post-divorce.
Right. And so we're going to focus on financials, particularly financial surprises that women commonly encounter. And obviously that, men may encounter some of these as well, but we're just sort of generalizing. This is what we see as commonly comes up in these scenarios based on, you could say it's stereotypical, but it's what we commonly see. So that's why we're going to focus at that level. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to circle back around and do what we commonly see surprises that men have when it comes to financial issues in a divorce. All right.
Oh, I'm done.
You're done?
I did I laid it all out there. That's no.
All right. Well, what are we gonna?
All right.
What's first?
All right. So number one, unaware of marital spending. Okay. And marital spending. What we're talking about is what I'm going to call where did all the money go? All right. Because I'm sure, you're like me, that if I had $1 for every time I had a wife and mother sit across the table and we're going over financials and you're looking at, okay, well, this is what the husband makes, this is what they earn, and then it's every month they are scrambling to try and have enough money to keep the lights on. And we really start digging in and we start to see habits, we start to see where some of that money went, and sometimes it's in inappropriate places. And it's being used in inappropriate ways. Yeah,
and we often see this especially with stay-at-home mothers that haven't been necessarily in charge of the finances. They've been taking care of the children, making sure that their spouse or their husband has everything he needs to perform well at work. You see a lot of times people fall into certain roles, which is important in marriages because it allows the marriage to thrive when they do things the right way. And the husband, you often see the husband will excel at work because the wife is keeping things in control at home. But usually in those same scenarios, the husband is in control of the finances. He's paying all the bills. And often the wife doesn't have a clue what his true income is. She'll get a tax return put in front of her every year and just signs off on it. But she really doesn't know what's in it because she trusts her husband, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But that results in, when you get into these divorce situations, these surprises. And then sometimes the surprises, you and I may look at, certain transactions over in some bank accounts and goes, well, it looks like you may have had to take care of a hospital bill or this expense or that expense, but the wife may see this big withdrawal of maybe $5,000. What's going on? Is he hiding money? Did he buy a ring for his girlfriend or something like that? so all of a sudden that surprise almost starts to evolve into something that may not be necessarily true, but because they weren't paying attention, questions start coming up.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not some nefarious act. It's not being, money's not being taken out for improper purposes. But a lot of times there is some irresponsible spending going on. Sometimes the spending is on another person. And until you start digging in, you're not going to know. And I mean, you were talking about, some of the things that we look at and look for. I've seen it. I'm sure you have also, where we start digging in and there's large cash advances. And it's always happening on a Thursday night or a Friday night. And basically, while my client was going through the marriage, living with her spouse, didn't put two and two together.
Right.
But in the context of a divorce, now all of a sudden it's, well, that's weird. Every Thursday night he has to work late,
right.
And it then turns out that, every Thursday night he's going to a cash machine and taking out $500, $600, $700. And then when we start looking at where the cash machine is, well, lo and behold, it's right near a dance club or something.
Or a hotel room.
Or a hotel, right. And
when you can rent by the hour.
Yeah. So basically, large cash withdrawals, secret bank accounts, money transfers that you just didn't know about. We've seen people transferring money. Sometimes it's to a paramour or somebody they're romantically involved with. Sometimes it's to family.
Yeah. We've seen that before too. Especially we've done some foreign divorces where
that's right.
It's not uncommon to send money back to their home country to support their family. And so they'll look on the surface, it may look nefarious. Well, there's a wire transfer offshore. Well, no, they've been doing that throughout the course of their whole marriage. And this is perfectly normal in this culture. So you've got to ask questions. So when you get confronted with this, rather than being surprised and thinking the worst case scenario first, and it may be the worst case scenario, but start asking questions before you allow something to blow up to be more than it is. Because I've seen situations where we turn over bank records during the course of the case, and all of a sudden we get this call, this angry call or angry letter, just where'd all this money go? Where'd this go? And he just pulled this money out he pulled $20,000 out of the IRA, out of his 401k and didn't tell her. I got a loan. And then he says, well, no, that was to pay for our pool. Remember? It wasn't free. But because she wasn't paying attention to the finances, she didn't know.
Yeah, really, if there's a takeaway, and there should be a takeaway here, the takeaway should be just be aware.
Right.
Okay, and this is not a comment. If you're in a healthy relationship, this is not a comment saying you should be distrustful. That you should not believe what your spouse is saying. But my bottom line, all right, is that ask questions. Okay, you have every right to look at the bank accounts. You have every right to see where the money is going and to ask questions about how it's being used. If you don't ask questions, you can't be surprised when you're surprised. So you like what I did there? Okay. So,
no.
But you didn't like it. Oh, too late. So just ask questions. That way, hopefully, you're going to avoid the big negative surprise that may come if you ever have to go down this path.
Yeah, and I had this brilliant thought.
No, I got to tell you, you've moved me with that last comment. Your brilliance is blinding.
Oh.
No, just understand what we don't like. Like I said before, I was joking, but not. Is we don't like surprises. Attorneys, in the context of a divorce case, don't like surprises.
Right.
What we really also don't like is watching when our clients are surprised because they didn't ask the right questions.
Yeah. Or, going back to where did all the money go? Because we've had that happen before too, where, well, gosh, over the course of the marriage, he earned this much money. How is it we only have this much in the 401k, and
sometimes it's to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. And you go through and you break down the bank accounts, and then you see, wow, it's y'all just spent it. So and that happens. But maybe sometimes you go through it. We've seen this happen too, where the wife thought everything was fine, and then all of a sudden she looks and she sees that, wait a minute, we should have had $100,000 in this account. Why is it down to $30,000? And we do some investigation, perhaps some forensic accounting, and lo and behold, there is this thing out there.
Yep.
And
there's another thing out there. We're out of time.
yeah. Up next, we're going to get into more situations, surprises, financial surprises that we see women commonly experience in a divorce. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lee Merriweather, and with me is Todd Orston. Todd and I are partners at the law firm of Merriweather & Tharp, and you're listening to Merriweather & Tharp Radio on the new Talk 106.7. If you want to learn more about us, you can always check us out online at AtlantaDivorceTeam.com. Well, today we are talking about financial surprises that women often experience in divorce. And the last segment we talked about the marital spending. Often they're surprised when they sit down and they look at the finances and they're like, wow, where did all the money go? Well, on the flip side of that, like what Todd likes to call, wait, we owe how much? So
that's not what I like to say. That's what many of our clients have said. But yeah, unaware of marital debt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's similar, right?
Yeah.
And the biggest similarity and the biggest, similarity between the two, the first segment and this, is if you are not doing what it takes to be aware of what the finances look like, you may not know the money that's being spent. You also may not be aware that there is overspending going on.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had clients that, we start down this path and all of a sudden, it's like, they're like, well, I have this one credit card. It's got like a $1,000 balance, and it's, well, oh, okay. But are you aware of the $60,000 or $70,000 of other debt? And it's like, head explode time.
Right.
They weren't aware. They weren't aware that the other spouse was doing these things. I had one case where my client had some premarital credit cards.
Right.
Rubber banded, sitting in a drawer. He didn't use them for whatever reason. The credit card companies didn't cancel them. And we get into the divorce, and it turns out that the wife, not only did she file bankruptcy once, but she filed bankruptcy 2 times.
Right.
Without him knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And she found these credit cards after her bankruptcy, changed the mailing address to a P.O. box, and started spending on these credit cards. So we get into the divorce, and she ran up cards.
Right.
And she, not they, bankrupted, did it again, and then found these other cards in his name, ran those up.
Oh, wow.
And he's sitting there going, how do I not have to file bankruptcy? How do I can't pay you. And it was a significant amount of money. So you have to be aware of the debt.
Yeah. And, and that can include mortgages. We've had situations where we are in the middle of mediation and we're trying to settle the case, and the other side, and I represented the husband in this one, but the wife was like, why is our mortgage so high? This doesn't make any sense to me. Oh, you must have gotten out a HELOC without giving me notice. And what? So we actually, while we were in the mediation, I had access to the internet. I went on the database, the public database, pulled up the HELOC and found her signature over all the documents, printed them in the mediation, handed them to her, and say, you signed off on all this stuff, so I'm not sure. You may not remember it, but here it is, and here's a notary here, so we can always call the notary. And so anyways, it helped facilitate settlement. But in that situation, she was surprised when she saw the raw number for how much they owed, the mortgage they owed on their house. But she completely forgot they had taken out a home equity line they had done some renovation on the house. So she just wasn't paying attention in that case. So it's important to become aware of the marital debt so you're not surprised. And maybe, sometimes if you haven't been paying attention, and I'm not trying to come down on people that haven't been paying attention, but try not to be surprised. If you just, okay, I wasn't paying attention. Let's figure this out now. And you know,
try not to go into shock. You know, you're gonna be surprised, but it can't be debilitating. It can't affect your ability to move forward and protect yourself and gather the other information you need to defend yourself and to present your own case.
So most of the time, I mean, in a healthy relationship, you often see the husband and the wife sitting down at least, you know, maybe once a quarter or at least once a year, having a budgetary meeting, talk about where they are. And, you know, the other thing, when we practice, we do marital balance sheets. So when you have to do a domestic relations financial affidavit, so you're supposed to add up all your debt. And so a lot of times people haven't, especially women, haven't done that. They haven't sat down and added up all their debt. So when they see that big number, it can be surprising.
Well, many of my clients, like yours, it's because they've never had to.
Right, and
and you said this earlier.
Yeah,
it's because
those are the rules that they were playing, and it's not that. And I definitely don't want it to sound like I was saying that women don't pay attention.
In my family, my wife handles a lot of the day-to-day financial issues. Okay, and she balances that with, you know, taking care of the kids and working and doing all the other things she does. But the bottom line is, there are aspects of our finances I know I am not 100% up to date on. You know, I don't ask her these things because I trust her. But you know what? If, God forbid, I found myself in this position going through a divorce, I would be scratching my head. And if something, you know, sort of came up that I wasn't aware of and it surprised me, I would have to look at myself and go, well, shame on you for not asking the questions.
Right, yeah.
But the point is, in my situation, I'm the guy who doesn't have his finger on the pulse of our family finances. But we see it so often with women who are taking care of the kids, taking care of the home, working, doing all these other things. And if the husband is like, I've got it covered.
Yeah.
You know, and it's fine, meaning I understand why. But we also see the divorces. We see when they come in, and then we have to dig in, and it's mortgages, credit card debt, tax debt, you know,
401k loans.
401k loans, student loans. You know, student loans, usually it's not a surprise because it's sort of hard to like go through a school program.
Right. But there's usually a surprise because so many people just make the minimum payments.
That's
so
right.
They're like, wait a minute, we only pay in the last 15 years, I only paid down $5,000 on it.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Personal loans, family, friends, you know, going and doing car title loans, things like that. Or how about employer loans?
Yeah.
I've had situations where somebody works for a company and they have several times gone to the company and they've basically taken a loan against a 401k, or they've said, hey, can you advance me some money?
Right.
So it's oh yeah, by the way, we owe $5,000 to my employer. So you have to ask the questions, and you know what? Sometimes it's common sense. Right. And by that I mean, if you know generally how much, and let's say you're not working, and you know generally what your spouse earns, and he pulls up in his new Corvette and says, next month's, you know, vacation is going to be stellar. I'm taking everybody to wherever. And you're scratching your head going, where is this money coming from?
Yeah.
Then you may need to ask some questions.
Right.
So that you don't experience this surprise.
Yeah. All right. So another surprise that a lot have is re-entry into the workforce.
Comes up all the time.
Yeah, and especially if you have a situation where the husband and wife had entered an agreement, basically that, okay, the wife is going to stay home and work, raise the children while the husband provides financially for the household, and now all of a sudden, whether it doesn't matter who's getting it, wants a divorce, the issue of, hey, look, you know, alimony is not going to be forever. Well, at least here in Georgia, there are some states like Florida that have permanent alimony. After so many years of marriage, there's permanent alimony. So, but a lot of times those alimony awards, they reduce over the course of time because there's an expectation that the wife is going to re-enter the workforce.
Yeah, but keep in mind, that's a permanent award. That has to do with duration. The permanency of it has to do with duration. What a lot of people get surprised about is, Well, I haven't worked in 10 years. I have been and am now dependent upon my spouse for my support.
Right.
They will continue to support me. What they don't understand sometimes is that the income of the spouse, while you were living under the same roof, sharing expenses may have been sufficient to provide for you,
Right.
so that you don't have to work. When you are now living in separate homes, separate mortgage or rent payments, car payments, this payment, that payment, that same salary may not be enough, and oftentimes is not enough to make it so that you don't have to work.
Right. To cover two separate households.
That's right.
Because in a sense, your living expenses are doubling because there's going to have to be a home for your spouse and who also needs room for the children, if you have children, to come visit him or her.
And yes, let's be clear, the judge will allow him to live in a home. All right. It's however bad he was, he gets to live under a roof. So yeah, but yet that's where a lot of the surprise comes up. And I think we're
Right.
going to have to go into a break, and we'll talk about this a little bit more after the break. But the surprise not just is that I'm going to have to get a job, it's a lot of times how quickly. Okay.
Right.
Because they're like, well, a lot of people are like, well, do I have 6 months, a year, a couple of years, and then fine, I'll go out and I'll start working again. And a lot of times the budget, the family budget,
Right.
isn't enough.
So up next, we're going to continue to dive into the financial surprises that we see divorcing women experience. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lee Merriweather, and with me is Todd Orson. Todd and I are partners at the law firm of Merriweather and Tharp, and you're listening to Merriweather and Tharp Radio on the new Talk 106.7. If you want to learn more about us, you can always read about us online at AtlantaDivorceTeam.com. Well, today we're talking about what we see most commonly, the surprises, at least the financial surprises that we see women experience going through a divorce. And we're speaking in generalities. We're grouping things together. This is not something that applies to everyone, but we did think it was important to talk about, because if someone's considering going through divorce, or the D word's been discussed, that they should, listening to this will prompt them to ask questions about, what about our finances? How much money have we made? Where is our money going? What are our debts? And get on top of everything. And, obviously we would hope that during the course of the marriage, once a month, once a quarter, once a year, the husband and wife are sitting down and working on a budget, working on a net worth statement. I mean, those are signs of a healthy marriage, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Not that the marriage is unhealthy, but the husband and wife enter roles where the wife is takes care of the children, and the husband is the breadwinner. So it's perfectly normal. I want to make clear when we're bringing these up, I don't want it sound like we're bashing on women or anything. So.
That is a look of contempt right there. Now, well, of course. It's a reality.
Right.
And the reality, anyone listening knows that, like I was saying before, in my family, it's a different dynamic.
Right.
Right? Growing up, for the most part, my mom did not work at a job. Mm-hmm. She was a typical stay-at-home mom
mm-hmm.
who worked her you-know-what off,
right,
taking care of the kids and making sure the house was taken care of and all of that, and probably worked 3 times as hard as my dad, who was at a job.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Dad. But the point is that so many of these decisions carry potential consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And a consequence could just simply be you are not getting the information you need to be kept apprised of what's going on in the family financially. You're just sort of deferring all of that to the spouse.
Right.
And that's fine. Okay. But if the D word has been used or if you are about to go down that path,
right, you
can't be surprised, because you haven't asked the questions, you haven't dug in to educate yourself about your finances. And what we're trying to do with this show is say, educate yourself.
Exactly. All right. So we left off talking about one of the surprises is when often women will come and expecting to be taken care of financially speaking. Like, well, the kids, it's 6-7 more years before they go off to college. Doesn't he have to pay for me can't we keep this arrangement? And there's situations where there's just not enough income to go around to make that happen. And your household expenses have suddenly doubled. And because you have 2 separate households, and now you actually have to go out and get a job, and because there's just he has enough money to pay child support, but not enough money to pay alimony on top of that. So it is just mathematics. It's just finances. So, sometimes we get the question: should I get a job during the divorce? Is that going to eliminate my alimony, that sort of thing, or should I wait till afterwards? Well, the problem is if you wait till after the divorce and you get a job afterwards, he can always come back to court to modify his alimony because he can argue that your need is suddenly changed because now you have an income.
Yeah, and we're going to go into this a little bit more. When you start looking at your budget, you realize how expensive living is. Okay? It's not give me $1,000 and I can survive.
Right.
Sometimes people are surprised by their budgets when they put together their budget, and they're like, wow, I guess I need $5,000 or $6,000 to survive.
Right.
Now, if your spouse makes $100,000, that's a great sizable income, but that's $8,300 per month.
That's before taxes.
And that's before taxes. So now you net that out and you take the taxes out. Let's just use some round numbers, and now you're at about $6,000, $6,500, okay? And you need $5,000 to live. Well, you're not going to get $5,000, and your husband has $1,000 to survive.
Yeah.
That means you're going to have a budget shortfall. So then the question then becomes, all right, do I need to go out and get a job? Well, no, you don't need to. Should you? Absolutely. If you want food and water, some of those things, then you do unfortunately have to start thinking long and hard about going out and getting a job.
And I think you've just hit number 4.
Yeah.
You just, without even knowing it, the incorrect assumptions regarding alimony and child support amounts and the duration of them as well.
Oh, I realize I did.
You just didn't telegraph it.
All right. Maybe I didn't realize it, but whatever. Assumptions about alimony and child support.
Right. And so I guess this surprise should not be a surprise. Talking about the first 2, like unaware of the money situation, the inflow of cash and the outflow and what their debt situation is. Well, so it should be no surprise that, we don't have an understanding what the budget's going to be after the divorce and whether there's enough money to go around. So often there's incorrect assumptions about the budget. And even, that's not just a surprise for women. And we see this with couples in general. Like, both sides are surprised by how much they're spending when they're forced in a divorce setting to sit down and add up their net worth, because you have to do that when you're dividing up the assets through equitable division here in Georgia. It's going to present itself, and people are often goes, wow, that's all I've saved over these years, because they weren't paying attention.
Yeah. So, with alimony, very quickly, we've done shows on this, but alimony, it's need based.
Right.
So it's need versus ability to pay. Those are the 2 primary factors. Do you have a need? I.e., is there a budget shortfall? Do you make enough to cover all of your expenses? If not, there's a shortfall. You have a need.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't stop there. You have to look at the other party. Do they have an ability to pay? Once again, if you have $100,000 income, meaning the husband does, and you net that out, and after everything, it's $6,000. It would be probably a little more than that, but let's say it's $6,000.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there's a child support obligation of $1,200 that the husband is paying. Well, you're not going to be able to get, $3,000-$4,000 of alimony, all right, because the ability to pay just isn't there.
And I want to add this last thing, because another thing that people don't take into consideration is, we've seen this happen before, where had a client got a great alimony award for her. We strongly encourage her to get a job, get completely independent of him, and just put that money in the bank for a rainy day. Maybe save it for college because there were some concerns about him. He made great money, but he was suffering from alcoholism. Well, we get the divorce. A year later, a year goes by. She does get a job, and she's starting to be able to support herself. And then he commits suicide.
Yeah.
So he'd gotten a life insurance policy, but the problem is there was this 2-year exclusion. So if you commit suicide within 2 years of getting your life insurance policy, they won't cover you. So now all of a sudden she's got no child support, no alimony, and thankfully she did go out and get a job. I think it was a part-time job at first, but that gave her experience on her resume that allowed her to go out and get a full-time job to make up that difference, because suddenly she didn't have that income. And yeah, she could bring an action against his estate and probate court, but gosh, that can take a long time. And we had Eric Broll on this show, a probate litigation attorney, talking about how the process can take a long time. So there's some practical aspects of thinking about taking care of yourself, after a divorce.
And very quickly, there are some strategic decisions that obviously go into whether or not you should, or at some point in time, or what point in time you should go out and get a job, because people will come in, and we'll have a woman sit across and, well, should I start looking now? Should I start looking in 6 months? If I look now, will that impact the kind of alimony that I might get? And therefore, should I get the alimony award and then start looking? And all right, all very reasonable, logical things that need to be thought about and considered when talking about this kind of strategy. But here's the thing. Here's my take. My take is, even if you wait, so let's say you wait, you go through the court process, your need is higher because you don't have a job, don't have income, you get an award of alimony, you then get divorced. If you then go get a job, it does open the door to a modification. So no matter what, it is possible to have the other party revisit that issue with the court.
Yeah.
So I typically tell people, look, unless this is a situation where the alimony and support is going to be so sizable that easily you'll be able to survive just on that support, then you need to be thinking about sooner rather than later getting back out there, getting into the workforce, because a lot of times the amount that you'll receive from earnings is greater than the alimony that you might be able to get from your spouse now that you have the separate budgets and you're living separately.
Yeah. Hey, well, up next, we're going to get into the other surprises, including surprises surrounding the marital home, surprises concerning insurance, and surprises concerning the cost of divorce. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lee Merriweather, and with me is Todd Orston. Todd and I are partners at the law firm of Merriweather and Tharp, and you're listening to Merriweather and Tharp Radio on the new Talk 106.7. If you want to read more about us, you can always check us out online at AtlantaDivorceTeam.com. Well, today we're talking about the financial surprises that we often see divorcing women experience, and we're talking in generalities here and stereotyping, but it's, the stereotype comes from what we see most commonly. Obviously, there's exceptions to what we're talking about, and Todd, you've even given some examples how you, that you weren't paying attention, or not you weren't, but your wife handles the finances in your relationship. So, there's exceptions to this, but we're talking in generalities, and but we have 3 more to hit. So, and 1 segment left.
So stop talking. And
all right, the marital home.
Yep.
So that becomes a big surprise.
Otherwise known as, but it's my home. I want to stay in my home.
Right.
I get it. I understand. Going back to what we've been building on, and talking about, budget-wise, it may not be possible. Okay? And you can't be surprised, or shouldn't be surprised. Again, if you are both living on a certain amount of income, and you have a $3,000 mortgage, well, all you have to do is crunch some basic numbers, and you might be able to say to yourself and understand, well, it's not possible for me to stay in the home. I'm probably not going to be able to afford it myself, and my spouse may not be able to give me enough income to help me pay the mortgage on the house.
And it's not just the mortgage. There's also, we often see two motivating factors.
Exactly.
There's the children. The kids are already going through enough with the divorce. I don't want to add to it that we're moving, or we're going to be in a different school district. I want to stay in this school district. And those are all really valid concerns. We're not trying to dismiss any of them, but you've got to pull back for a second, because the last thing you want is to suddenly become house poor. So, okay, I'm going to keep the kids here, but I have so little money that we can't do anything. We can't go on vacations. We can't go out to eat, because we've seen that. You become, all your money goes to not just pay the mortgage, but pay the utilities, especially if it's a large home, because we've seen that before too, where there was a large home and the utilities were so big, so much. It was a 6,000 square foot or more home, that it didn't make sense for just 3 people to be in such a large home, especially since they're not operating as a family where they're entertaining anymore.
Yeah, and I've seen situations where the opposing party, adamant, I want to keep the house. Can you afford it? Don't think you can afford it. Yes, I can. Yes, I will. Fine. They end up taking the house, transferring it into their own name, and 6 months later, I'm hearing that there are foreclosure proceedings beginning.
Yeah,
because they haven't been able to make the payments. So a lot of times when you're working with an attorney, we will work with our clients, and we'll, the budgets that we create, we'll look. We are not financial experts in terms of financial planning and, budget analysis in regards to advising you how to live your life. But when we put those documents together, sometimes it's very apparent.
Yeah.
And we're looking at our client going, you really shouldn't do this.
Yeah, and then sometimes it depends on where they are in their life, what season of life they're in, because we've seen some, I've unfortunately seen some 40-year marriages that end in divorce, and so you have the housewife, and she's taking care of everything all these years, and now he's wants to move on, right or wrong. It's the decision that's been made. And so she wants to keep the house because that's going to be some level of normalcy, but he took care, he mowed the lawn, he did all the things around the house. That may not be a good idea for her. So sometimes we just ask questions like, okay, what is it you really want to do on the go for it? Or do you want to take care of this lawn? No, I'd have to hire somebody to care for the lawn. Well, how much will that cost? And we start doing that math, and the next thing you know, really the wiser decision to make is to sell that home, pull as much equity out of the home, and then try to buy maybe a townhome or a condo in cash. So then as you get later in life and he retires and suddenly there is no alimony because he's retiring, but your costs are low because you don't have a mortgage payment.
Yeah, and even if you do your budget analysis and you look and you're like, all right, I think I can do this, but you're going to be cutting it close. Well, then what happens the first time you have to repaint your house?
Or the AC breaks.
Or the AC breaks and you don't have insurance to fix it. All right. A paint job, $3,500, $4,000, depending on the house. AC goes out. You may be out hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And we've seen that also happen where people are like, I think I can do this. But then
there's no emergency fund.
The stars don't align, and this happens, and this breaks, and this needs to be replaced. And then all of a sudden they're like, I can't do this.
And what do I hear? Like when you think you're going to be able to squeak it by, that's when that's just when fate hits you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, Murphy's Law.
Uncle Murphy moves in. That's what I was trying to remember. All right. So insurance, you touched on that, but health insurance in particular, because this is something that even with a couple that is meeting and talking about budgets, they often don't think about what are the insurance costs, because now all of a sudden the wife is going to be on her own. And now we see exceptions to this, but for the most part, every insurance policy I've ever seen, except for maybe one from another country, when there's a divorce, that's a qualifying event where the husband or the wife, depends, can no longer maintain the spouse on their insurance policy. So she has to break off. Now there's what's called COBRA. She can get that, but usually COBRA is
very expensive.
It's just too expensive. And so she's got to go get her own health insurance and dental insurance. And so that insurance cost is often a big surprise.
Yeah. Again, going back to the budget, we see this all the time where we sit down and we put together a budget. And we oftentimes will see a lot of surprise, meaning our clients are looking at the number that we put in front of them. And I've had people look at me and go, that can't be right.
Right.
And it's like, look, this is based on the information you gave me.
Mm-hmm.
This is your car. This is your home. This is the lawn care and the cell phone and the house phone and the cable TV and the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And here's the number.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Even the people who pay the bills sometimes aren't actually in tune with how much money it actually is. There are situations where I've represented the people who on a daily basis and a monthly basis are the ones who are writing the checks, paying the bills, but they've never looked at a comprehensive budget.
Right.
And to them, it's just writing a check. Oh, today another check. But now all of a sudden it's on one piece of paper and it's like, this is what your budget is. Like, wow, now I know where all my money was going.
Yeah. So insurance, whether it's health insurance, sometimes it's auto insurance because now you're splitting up and perhaps, there was a multi-car discount. Now all of a sudden the wife who may have had, or maybe the wife takes some teenage children onto her insurance. I mean, so those become big surprises, and those are things that need to be negotiated too, because you need to take those into consideration when it comes to an award of alimony. So
that's why my kids are going to horse and buggy. I mean, it's
they're just going to walk.
I hope
everywhere.
they're not listening because
Segway.
There's some frantic kids right now. Like, no.
They can just ride a Segway to school.
A Segway, yeah,
probably
sure.
cheaper than the insurance.
I'm going to let you tell my kids that, and we'll see how that goes.
I will. I'll tell them that's what your dad said.
All right. Finally, underestimating the cost of divorce.
Yes.
And I know that's what we do, and sometimes, when we broach this subject and talk about it, it's a little uncomfortable for us because it is expensive.
Yeah. Especially if part of what we're having to do is help our clients go through this, untangle this financial mess and figure out what's really going on. The less you're aware of the finances, the more that part costs.
Yeah, and so the way that we handle it, I would like to think we are different, but I'm sure there are other attorneys who are out there that handle it similarly. We don't like surprises, so we will sit down with someone at the very beginning and explain, look, this is what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And if things go very smoothly, if we can work things out, this is what the cost might be. If we have to go down the litigation path, this is what it might be. We may have, this expense or that expense. This is what the minimum amount might be. This is what a maximum amount might be. But the bottom line is, and I say this to people on the phone all the time, you called an attorney. You knew when you called, it's going to cost you money.
Mm-hmm.
The surprise is really in how much. Okay, and different attorneys, even ones like us, where we are very efficient in what we do, okay, it's still a lot of money.
Still a lot of money. And you've got to keep your lawyer current because
That's right.
We're not banks. We can't loan the money. And so that's a big surprise. Sometimes I'm like, well, I've got to keep this current. And yes, there are situations where we can go to the opposing side and ask that they be responsible for some of the attorney's fees. But sometimes that doesn't happen right away. And it's very specific. Like each county is a little bit different. Each judge is a little bit different how they handle that. And obviously each state is different. There's different laws in each state. In Georgia, there's a law that allows you to go for attorney's fees. But, that about wraps up this show. Man, that went by so fast. Hey, thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And if you're enjoying the show, definitely go out and give us a review. We would love it. If you've missed the show or you were listening to it in your car and you wanted to go back or share it with someone, well, you can find us in most podcast directories on iTunes, and we're even in YouTube on YouTube, youtube.com/Atlanta Divorce Lawyer. You can find it on our website as well, mtlawoffice.com/podcasts. Thanks so much for listening.
This audio program does not establish an attorney-client relationship with Meriwether and Tharp.